Today we're going to begin looking at what are called deponent and semideponent verbs. These verb forms are really easy. You're not learning any new forms, but we are learning sort of a new category of verbs and how to think about them. So a deponent verb is a verb that looks passive. So we would say it's passive in form, but we translate it the way that we would translate active verbs. So there's this difference. They are verbs that can take a direct object. They are not going to be seen with the ablative or ab plus the ablative, but their forms look passive. They take passive endings. They only occur in the passive. And these are verbs that themselves cannot be made passive. So we'll see some examples of them. But these are verbs that even though their forms are passive, we're going to translate them actively. And if we want to express the idea of that verb passively, we have to use a different verb. So here for you is an example. We know this old favorite, dico, dicere, dixi, dictum, which means to say or to tell or to speak. And we have this verb, which is a deponent verb, loquor, loqui, locutus sum. This verb also means to speak. So loquor is the first person singular present form. You can see it has that OR ending. And you can see this is loqui. This is the present infinitive. So just if we were making the present infinitive of dico, dicere, it is dici. Remember, for third conjugation, we remove the ere and add I. So this ending tells us that loquor belongs to the third conjugation. And we have this form, locutus sum, which tells us how to form the perfect system. Our participle is locutus, and then we would add forms of the verb to be. So although with dico we can make this passive, we can say dicitur, it is said. We cannot do this with loquor. So if we say loquitur, which is the present third person singular form of this verb, this means he, she, it speaks. And we can't make it passive. The form is passive, but we translate it actively. There's another category of these verbs that are called semideponent. With semideponent verbs, the active forms are in some tenses, and you have passive forms in other tenses. The principal parts of this verb, when you learn the principal parts, will show you which have passive forms and which have active forms. So here are our three most common ones. Audeo, audere, ausus sum, which means to dare. You can see that this is active and this is active. So our present, future, and imperfect are all going to have active forms, but you can also see ausus sum means our perfect forms, the perfect, the pluperfect, and future perfect will all be passive. The same is true for gaudeo, which means to rejoice. Gaudeo, gaudere, present, future, and imperfect will have active forms. Gauisus sum, the perfect stems, will have passive forms. And finally, soleo, solere, which means to be accustomed to or to be used to something, will have present, future, and imperfect active forms, but solitus sum, the perfect, will look passive. And again, these are verbs that cannot be made passive, even in the present, future, and imperfect, because they are these semideponent forms. They have half their forms are active, half are passive. So we can say Marcus pugnare audet. Marcus dares to fight in the present. But Marcus pugnare ausus est. Marcus has dared to fight in the past. Pugnare. Deponent verbs are easy to tell from passive forms of other verbs because they take direct objects, just like an active verb would. So in the same way that I can say verba dico, I speak words, I can also say verba vera loquor, I speak true words. You can see that these words are in the accusative. You can see from the translation that they're a direct object. This is going to happen regularly with deponent verbs. Or you can see here, this is the verb miror, which means to be amazed at. The infinitive is mirari. So you can see from the ARI that this is a first conjugation verb. And I could say meum ingenium miraris. You are amazed at my genius. Meum ingenium. This is accusative singular, so it is the direct object of the verb. We do have a few special uses of deponent forms, and these are worth remembering because they are slightly unusual. The first is the passive of video. So video we know means to see, and it can mean to be seen. That would just be a regular passive usage. But it also has a deponent use that means to seem. That is, if you are seen to be a poet, you seem to be a poet. And so sometimes it makes more sense for us to translate this verb, videor, whether it is in any tense, present, imperfect, future, perfect, pluperfect, future perfect, as a form of the verb to seem. A couple of other things. The verb nascor means to be born. To be born, you could argue, is just sort of a passive idea. And so maybe this form is deponent really because when one is being born, one is never actively doing anything. But nevertheless, that is one that you might want to remember. Particularly, it's not going to take a direct object because being born just doesn't take a direct object. And gradior is a verb that we'll see a lot. It means to step, but it is less common in this form and more common in compound forms. And you can find these in your book, but something like aggredior, which means to go forward or to attack, eggredior, which is exgredior, it means to go away from, progredior, it should be to go forward, regredior, to return. So these are special uses of this verb that you're more likely to see in compounds rather than just by itself. And finally, we have this verb fio. You can see that fio looks totally active. So it's fio fis fit, fimus fitis fiunt. So it looks like dico, for example, in the present, and it's completely regular in the imperfect fiebam, fiebas, fiebat, fiebamus, fiebatis, fiebant. And you can see it also behaves completely regularly in the future, fiam, fies, fiet, etc. But this verb has what we might say is a kind of passive meaning. So it often means something like to be made. So it acts as the passive of the verb facio, but it often means to happen or to become. So the car, the fiat, means let it happen. So it is a verb that has, like the verb to be, is not going to take a direct object. It's going to take a nominative, both as a subject and as a predicate. Its perfect forms are going to be the passive forms of facio. So they would be factus sum, or factus eram, or factus ero. But we would use fio, fiebam, and fiam for the present, imperfect, and future of to be made, or to happen, or to become. So that is it. That deponent verbs are, in terms of their form, just like passives. The only thing is that we need to know their meaning, because their meanings are active and they will take direct objects. So send me your questions.